An iron nail, bartered for paradise, nearly brought down a British warship and accidentally unleashed a tragedy that decimated a thriving Polynesian culture. This is the truth behind the HMS Dolphin. A ship, battered and weary from an exhausting 2-year expedition, finally limped back into a British port. Her crew had voyaged to the most isolated corners of the globe, surviving by little more than pitch and hope. This vessel, a 6th-rate frigate of the Royal Navy, was once a proud machine held together by thousands of sturdy iron nails. But now, it was a dangerous skeleton, silently betraying its structural integrity. Why? Because the desperate sailors had found other, more desirable uses for the metal, uses that threatened the very ship that carried them home. This is the story of how global ambition, iron currency, and catastrophic cultural clash defined a crucial turning point in world history. This legendary vessel, the HMS Dolphin, was commissioned in 1752, an impressive frigate capable of mounting 24 cannons. Soon after its launch, Britain was embroiled in the vast global conflict known as the 7 Years' War, and the Dolphin saw active naval combat. When the war concluded in 1763, the British Admiralty immediately repurposed the powerful frigate for a mission far greater than battle: the pursuit of a geographical phantom. For centuries, European scholars and cartographers had ardently believed in the existence of Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, a mythical continent deemed necessary to balance the known landmasses of the Northern Hemisphere. Although the discovery of Australia in the 17th century had reduced the supposed size of this southern behemoth, the conviction that another massive landmass lay hidden in the vast, unexplored expanse of the South Pacific remained a powerful driving force for national glory and economic expansion. The lure of this massive, rich, and unknown territory was simply too strong to resist, creating the very environment for the Dolphin's destiny to unfold. The first expedition began in 1764, with the Dolphin sailing directly from Britain under the command of Captain John Byron, grandfather of the celebrated poet Lord Byron. The journey began with the crossing of the Atlantic Ocean, followed by a brief necessary stop in Rio de Janeiro for resupply and subsequent charting of the remote Falkland Islands. The true test came when the crew was ordered to press yet further south toward the notorious Strait of Magellan. This winding channel at the very tip of South America, characterized by fierce gales and sudden violent shifts in weather, demanded every ounce of skill and courage from the crew. It was a baptism by ice and storm before they could even reach their true destination. Finally, surviving this grueling passage, the Dolphin sailed westward and entered the immense expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Their search began, but instead of the grand southern continent, they found only a scattering of isolated islands in what is now modern French Polynesia. Frustrated by the definitive absence of Terra Australis Incognita, Byron nevertheless ordered the ship west, eventually reaching Jakarta, Indonesia, for a crucial maintenance and refit period before sailing home around the Cape of Good Hope of Africa. The Dolphin arrived back in Britain in May 1766. While the mythical continent remained elusive, the crew returned with valuable reports on the unique animal and plant life found on the islands, and the Dolphin completed one of the fastest circumnavigations of the globe. The journey failed, but the excitement remained, and soon a new captain would set sail for a destination that would change the ship and the crew forever. But what was it about this second fateful voyage that would turn a simple ship into a global scandal? Just 3 months later, in August 1766, the Dolphin was back at sea. The mission remained the same, but the captaincy changed hands to Samuel Wallis, a man soon to enter the annals of exploration for entirely unintended reasons. The Atlantic crossing was once again relatively uneventful, but the passage around the hazardous tip of South America proved nearly fatal. The frigate was forced to spend a truly grueling 3 months struggling against monstrous waves and contrary winds to navigate the Strait of Magellan. The crew battled heavy winds and rough seas, and in doing so, they painstakingly mapped out crucial geographical features of this dangerous, icy part of the ocean. The effort, however, came at a massive cost to the men's health and spirit. The ship itself had narrowly survived the treacherous waters, but the crew was now desperately ill, with scurvy threatening to decimate the ship's complement. They were badly in need of fresh provisions and vital medical rest, with Captain Wallis himself gravely sick. The urgency of their condition would soon force the British to make landfall, setting the stage for a cultural clash that nobody, least of all the captain, could have predicted. The prize they sought was not gold, but survival. But what if the price they had to pay was far steeper than they imagined? Captain Wallis, gambling everything on a desperate choice, steered the Dolphin northwest toward a little explored section of the Pacific Ocean, praying to reach land. In early June, the lookout spotted a chain of islands in the Tuamotu archipelago. The crew managed a brief stop for meager food and fresh water before quickly heading west once more. Then, on June 18, 1767, a sight of great beauty and immense promise finally appeared: more land. 5 days later, on the 23rd, the HMS Dolphin dropped anchor in a lagoon ringed by coral and volcanic peaks, Tahiti, which Wallis optimistically named King George's Island in honor of his sovereign. This moment was a massive relief for the British, as much of the crew, including Captain Wallis himself, were gravely ill after their punishing months at sea. The island, however, was far from deserted. Tahiti was already home to Polynesians who had expertly navigated and settled the island centuries earlier, developing a rich and sophisticated culture. When the Tahesians observed the large British ships sailing into their pristine bay, they quickly launched their canoes and expertly paddled out to greet the newcomers. Wallis, peering from the deck, focused immediately on the contents of the canoes. Not only the Tahitians themselves, but essential pigs, chickens, and fresh tropical fruit, provisions the crew needed to defeat scurvy. Wallis promptly ordered his ship's gunner and 2 midshipmen to commence trade with the islanders. In exchange for the precious supplies, the British offered what they deemed valuable: beads, knives, and iron nails. Early negotiations were fraught with tension, and the British quickly resorted to firing their cannons in the air to intimidate the islanders when they didn't immediately acquiesce to the terms. This early act of coercion set a tone that foretold the exploitation that was to come. The tension boiled over quickly. On June 24th, just a day after dropping anchor, Wallis's report described the Dolphin being surrounded by hundreds of canoes, which he alarmingly claimed were furnished rather for war than trade. He wrote that the Tahesians raised a collective shout and began to converge on the ship, hurling stones as they approached. The British immediately retaliated, opening fire with cannons. The Tahesians scattered only after a cannonball tore one of their large canoes in half. Miraculously, after this short and brutal clash, tensions eased and friendly relations were established. George Robertson, the ship's master, diligently maintained detailed records of the exchanges that followed. He quickly learned that the Tahesians, lacking the technology themselves, possessed an overwhelming desire for iron, specifically nails. Robertson documented a rudimentary exchange rate that quickly emerged. A single 3-inch iron nail was said to be worth as much as a 20-pound pig, an absurd value that underscores the islanders' utter lack of iron. But iron nails were soon traded for something far more personal than provisions. On one occasion ashore, Robertson and a group of Liberty men were approached by 3 Tahitian women making a specific, repeated gesture. The ship's gunner later explained the gesture's meaning, revealing that the price for companionship was a single piece of iron. Over the next few weeks, the sailors depleted the ship's small supply of extra nails, and then, driven by desire, moved on to pulling nails from the very structure of the Dolphin itself, including those securing their hammocks and the cleats used to tie the ship's essential rigging ropes. The popular legend that the sailors were destroying their ship for relations is exaggerated. The Dolphin remained seaworthy, but the desperate actions led to men sleeping on deck and made securing the miles of rigging ropes far more difficult and dangerous. The legend of the nail economy remains famous, but the true story of this exchange and the deadly cost to the islanders was only just beginning. What deeper, darker forces were at play in this island paradise that the European sailors simply couldn't comprehend? It is crucial to understand that many of the British accounts were second-hand, written later, and filled with cultural confusion. Captain Wallis, for instance, was bedridden for much of the time in Tahiti, meaning his dramatic reports were based on information passed on well after the fact. More importantly, these accounts utterly failed to consider the complex Tahitian perspective. The Tahitian women Robertson encountered were not random individuals, but were more than likely followers of a god of war. They often traveled the islands performing religious rituals designed to encourage fertility and prosperity. And these did, in fact, involve ritualistic fertility ceremonies. The British had arrived precisely during one of the Tahesians' seasonal festivals, and the men had also been unknowingly cutting trees from a sacred grove when the women initially approached them. The islanders may have genuinely believed that the powerful, mysterious sailors were somehow associated with their gods and were including them in their sacred rites. Without any common language, cultural confusion was tragically inevitable, transforming a spiritual act into Western exploitation. Structural integrity aside, the officers were deeply concerned about a darker issue: the potential for a venereal disease outbreak among the Tahesians. Although the ship's doctor assured everyone that the crew was healthy upon departure, the true catastrophe arrived later. When James Cook visited the island in 1769, just 2 years after the Dolphin left, he documented a major syphilis outbreak among the native population. While the Tahesians blamed a French expedition that arrived the following year, the legacy of European contact was clear. Cook estimated that a staggering 90% of the Tahitian population was ultimately devastated by Western diseases. The exchange for iron nails cost the islanders their culture and their lives. After about a month in port, the crew of the Dolphin had recovered, and the ship's hold was full of fresh provisions. In late July, they finally raised anchor and departed the beautiful but now infected island. They continued westward, successfully passing through the Gilbert and Ellice Islands and then the Marianas, before navigating back around the Cape of Good Hope. The Dolphin finally returned to Britain in May of 1768, securing its place in history as the first ship to circumnavigate the planet twice. The voyage may not have discovered the mythical Terra Australis Incognita, but it brought back valuable information about a new, exotic part of the world. The humorous tale of the crew tearing apart their ship for nails is a captivating legend, but it ultimately masks a much deeper and more tragic reality, a legacy of cultural misinterpretations, reckless exploitation, and the catastrophic destruction of a proud people's way of life. Was the discovery of paradise worth the cost of its eventual ruin? The age of exploration was fueled by ambition, but its true currency was often measured in human cost. Did this in-depth look at exploration's dark side grip your attention? Our animated history documentaries are designed to make the past compelling and entertaining, backed by thorough research from respected historians, with sources shown on screen. Let us know your thoughts on the legacy of the HMS Dolphin in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join our community and stay tuned for the next chapter of history.